Hello and welcome everyone to the Ryerson University Ted Rogers School of Management International Sports Business Spotlight. My name is Chris Schufelt, Vice President of Business Operations at MLSE. We continue our Spotlight series today with Diego Moratorio, General Manager of Major League Soccer in Canada. Diego and I go back over 10 years now, working together when he first joined Coca-Cola in Canada. And to this day, we spend numerous hours working together on Major League Soccer and Toronto FC. So Diego, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Chris.
Absolutely. This is not your first time. 3 years ago, when I was teaching this course, I think back in 2018, we welcomed you into the classroom at that time physically, but we're virtual now as the pandemic is over a year, and we're doing it online right now. So thank you again. So I want to give some background as to why I thought you were a perfect guest for this series in this international class. And your background is varied. It wasn't necessarily a natural path into marketing right away, and it's quite an interesting background. So I'll read a bit of a bio, and then we'll get into a great discussion here. So Diego's a native of Venezuela, and after graduating with a degree in industrial engineering and a master's degree in international finance, his career journey started with Procter & Gamble in Venezuela, where he was a product scientist and engineer working on the Pampers brand before graduating into roles taking him across the world, eventually to the US as a business manager. Moving over to Coca-Cola, Diego was able to land in their Canadian office working on a number of their big brands, leading the Powerade brand specifically to record sales, and graduating over to the sparkling portfolio, leading major campaigns in sports and big retail. He followed his passion for sports, and specifically soccer, to land himself as the first ever employee of Major League Soccer in Canada, where he is working to build the MLS brand and partner portfolio in Canada in the exciting times, obviously, leading up to World Cup 2026. Diego is the father of twin boys, and I like to say they're both diehard TFC fans, although I'm not sure Diego would be able to say that as a league employee. So what do you say to that one, Diego?
I'll take the fifth on that one.
Right. As the league office,
they are TFC fanatics. So
awesome. We love it, and it's great to see them at matches, and hopefully we'll get back to that point sometime in the near future. So obviously the last 12 months have been difficult for all of us in this business, and we've been working hand in hand through a lot over the pandemic, and March 12th was that day where, it was the day after the NBA had shut down. And for us was, we were all running around figuring out what was going to happen. And, your office and specifically the office in New York was the same. And the league as an emerging, we could say as an emerging league, growing tremendously fast over the last number of years, specifically the last 15 years, it was really important to get back onto the pitch. Very much stated that the league lost a lot of money last year, and not just the league, but the league and the teams, over $1 billion. But we had to play. I just love to hear some insight as to the pressures and getting back on the pitch, and why it was so important to get back to playing soccer last year.
Listen, I remember that day. It's tattooed on me. March 12th. I was coming back from Mexico. And then 2 days later, I wouldn't have been able to come back into Canada without quarantine for 14 days. So I remember it. Listen, at the time, we didn't really know the scope of what was happening with COVID and what were the impact going to be for clubs and league. But at the same time, we had the responsibility to bring back our product. And our product is our sport, and we have a responsibility to our fans to deliver that. And then I think the league, the clubs went through the motions in the right way. A lot of the things that we did as a league were actually taken on by the NBA, by NFL, on the approach to coming back. And honestly, it wasn't part of the decision wasn't how much money we were going to lose, because we knew that it was going to take a hit as an enterprise. Similar to small retail, similar to small business operators, we knew that we had to power through. And the number one guiding principle was how we deliver the product back to our consumers, especially in a time where people were going through so much stuff. Bringing a little bit of happiness back to the homes in Canada and in the US was critical. And that's the way we operated.
And obviously it's a challenging time, and all the leagues had to go through a scenario where, we've got the players and we're worried about health and safety, and from staff to players to everybody that's involved, traveling parties, etc. Renegotiation of CBAs. I think it's been 3 for Major League Soccer over the last, couple of years, which certainly takes a toll and has its challenges. And again, it seems like, that both sides have come out of this, and we're back playing soccer again, almost ready for 2021.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that the reason we're having those CBA discussions, the reason we're having to renegotiate, is because just the explosive growth of the league. Suddenly, things that maybe were not worth as much before now are worth much more, and that's a discussion that is natural on every league. I think the players have been great through all this, and I think we're both league, clubs, players going to come out on top. So we feel it. Partners are giving us calls to see what's up with MLS. When is the season going to start? Like it's good momentum. Despite being a very difficult year, good momentum for the league, good momentum for Canadian clubs, also showcasing themselves in CONCACAF champions. So there's a lot of momentum happening, and sometimes a little bit of friction gets you to the right place.
Yeah, and it's been apparent through all of our leagues that health and safety of the players has been top priority. The partnerships that we've formed with government officials, health officials, the collective connection between all the leagues with regards to health and safety has been tremendous as well.
Yeah, there's been involvement from the highest levels of government in the U.S. and in Canada to get us to come back to play in a safe manner. So it's all hands on deck. And health and safety is number one priority. And listen, Mr. Fauci, Dr. Fauci was involved in developing the MLS's back guidelines. So that tells you how serious as an enterprise we were taking the situation.
Exactly. And speaking of the MLS's back tournament, we started playing again down in Orlando at this unique tournament. All the teams come together under one roof, and we play effectively inside of a bubble. And that was the best way we could protect everybody involved and actually play some football as soon as we could. We had to innovate. So on the business side, we certainly have to worry about, both club and league has to worry about, where we're going to drive revenue from. This is a gate-driven league, bums in seats, right? Admissions revenue. And what are we going to do to drive revenue? So, Diego, you were at the forefront of a lot of the discussions with regards to innovative technology that would help us drive revenue, whether it's sponsorship, but also fan engagement with regards to the virtual fan programs that we had. We'd love to hear you talk just about that and how you went through that journey to land where we did, which ended up being great for the clubs and for the league.
Yeah, I mean, it was a massive undertaking. We went from suddenly we have assets that we are sharing with partners, and suddenly those assets are no longer there. How do you go back to a partner and say, hey, the assets that we're trying to deliver for you are no longer there. Can you work with us to try to find a different solution? So a couple of work streams got kicked off, and you've probably seen it. You've seen it with NHL. There are different ways of delivering assets back to partners. But for us, because we are in Canada and we had a particular feed coming over to TSN and TVA, we had to figure out a way of, okay, how are we going to deliver LED as advertising opportunities for our partners? So we worked with 3-4 different companies to deliver a couple of things. The first one was a PAD system, which is a parallel ad. So if you're in Canada, you will be receiving LED advertising that is different from the one that you would be receiving if you were in the US. And at the same time, we put a virtual overlay on the asset attribution. So when you were looking at the match of TFC playing Columbus on TSN and on TVA, you would actually be getting virtual advertising that's overlaid in post-production. So we really have to move fast to make sure that we will be able to execute that. But it has now opened the doors for opportunities moving forward. So sometimes crisis brings the best in all of us, including suppliers, including flexibility with the enterprise, and including flexibility with our Canadian clubs.
It was tremendous how this all came around, because Diego, I remember it was like a year and a half before the pandemic, and you're trying to pitch us on this.
2018, I was pitching that.
You were pitching us on this technology to say, okay, there's a way of delivering to Canadian fans, and we can still deliver, the physical or virtual signage back to the US as well. And here it is. And at the time, it was ahead of its time. And then
it took COVID to prove me right.
it did, and it was a tremendous asset for the Canadian clubs. And in fact, we're now talking about what does that look like in the future. So absolutely, it's innovation happened for MLS's back. Can you talk about the fan engagement and why that part was important as well with the virtual fan wall?
Yeah. So the key thing, and this goes back to what we were discussing a couple of minutes ago, which is what we're trying to deliver to our fans is a little bit of a pause, a little bit of something that they take their head out of everything that was going on. We wanted to take it a step further, which was, how do we actually get them engaged in the match? They can't be at the stadium. You can't congregate. So is there a way of getting our fans into the match? And so we came with this idea about creating a fan virtual wall where you could actually send in either pictures, JPEGs, short videos, and then that will be actually showcased in the broadcast. So depending if you were watching in Columbus, you will get the Columbus feed. If you were watching in Toronto, you would get the Toronto feed, and we were able to connect those dots and just get the fans to be a part of it. I know the government has been saying this a lot. We're all in this together. We are, as a soccer family, we were all in it together, and we still are. You got TFC flying to the US because they need to be in the US for now, and you got Orlando giving you a hand in whatever you need. Same with Montreal, who are working with Miami, and then Vancouver, who's working with Real Salt Lake.
Yeah, and we have to figure it out. And for our club and other clubs within Major League Soccer, these virtual assets and the digital innovation allowed us to drive a substantial part of our sponsorship revenue that we didn't think we'd be able to drive as much as we did. So those opportunities, and now a lot of them were signage based and advertising opportunities, which is not always the model that clubs and us specifically drive all of our revenue with. But brands were willing to work with us because they wanted to be part of it, and the great partners that we have certainly wanted to be part of the year of coming back to sport. So we're seeing that again, and as we transition into this season, and I would say that the partners have been tremendous through this period of time, and despite the fact that some of their businesses are going through those challenges as well.
Yeah, not only at the club level, at the league level, they've been great. We got partners, so Coca-Cola, Powerade, Kellogg's, Pringles, Cheez-It. They just want to figure out a way of, again, bringing to the consumers and to the fans the experience of what we're here to offer. And then when you connect the passion of the fan with the love of the brand, you have something going.
So we'll connect back later on in the session about some more of your current role, but I'd like to dig into a little bit of the start of your career and the journey from graduating as an engineer and then finding your way into marketing and coming from Venezuela. So starting at Procter & Gamble, one of the biggest companies in the world, and a master of brands, major brands. And you're an engineer working in the Pampers brand. How do we get from there to a marketer? Talk to me through that, Diego.
I think I always get this question because it's like, I'm sorry, you're an engineer, but you're in marketing. I think the way to summarize it is very simple. It's an engineer just teaches you a way to think. You have several variables. You identify which variables are important, which ones are not important, and then you make a decision on how to move forward based on that information. So if you translate that into the marketing side, is what are the variables? Well, number one, what is the consumer truth? What does the consumer think about your brand today? Number two, what can you promise them to change their behavior? And number three, how do you make them believe that that you either have the brand or the product or the experience to solve whatever consumer truth they are. And it's the same for when you're selling soccer, when you're selling NHL, when you're selling football, and when you're selling diapers. You just need to understand what is driving the decision. How do you change the behavior?
Now, is that theory you learned initially when you were at P&G? Is that how they go to market? Is that where a lot of that thinking comes from?
Yeah, 100%. I think P&G is an incredible school. The best marketers in the world are at P&G, and they just the day one. So the day I joined the marketing organization in Toronto, they shipped me down to Cincinnati to spend 10 days straight, 24/7 on how we do marketing at P&G. And it's always, the formula is always the same. Understand your consumer truth, understand what is going to make them change their behavior, and then offer them a reason to believe in your product. So yeah, and I was able to translate that into my next role at Coca-Cola, and then I'm bringing it over to Major League Soccer the best way I can.
Amazing. And your transition from P&G to Coca-Cola, specifically, you worked and were lead on the Powerade brand and had some real success when you were working on that. And Gatorade is a powerhouse in the isotonic category, right? And the other brands are challenging for sure. And at the time it was Gatorade, Powerade, and BioSteel wasn't in the play, and now Body Armor's in play. There's a number of different isos in play, but at the time it was really Gatorade and Powerade. So you trying to tackle this mountain, right? Talk to me about some of the programs, maybe if it was athlete endorsements, sport properties, what was able to take you to that next level with the Powerade brand where you had tremendous success?
Yeah, I think, and just to put it in perspective for the audience, is we're talking about Powerade, a 14 share brand in Canada. From 2010 through 2014, we grew to 35 share. So that's basically doubling the profit for the brand. Now, it was funny because the same thinking that I had when I was within P&G, I just took it into Powerade, and was, what is the key difference? And there was this thinking, not only with internally with Coca-Cola, not only with the sales organization, but there was this thinking that the product was not as good as the competitor. So the first thing we did is, okay, we're going to tell consumers that this is actually a better product. We're going to launch an innovation. So if you think about 2010, we went from a basic isotonic to the Ion 4 formulation, which basically so it had sodium, sugar, energy, and a couple of more magnesium. And that just gave us the opportunity to have a discussion with Loblaw. And the reality is that we had never sold Powerade at Loblaw since 2004. We went in, we got the sales guys to believe in the product. We got the guys at Loblaw to believe in the product, and we got it listed. Overnight, we gained 37% of ACV distribution. What happened then was very simple. Walmart was asking us, why are they selling and we don't have it listed? And then Costco came in and said, why do they have it and we don't have it? So it was a little bit of a perfect storm. You have the right story for the retailer, you have the right story for the consumer, and now you have the belief internally that the product is not only as good, but better than your competitor. So that enabled us to have a little bit more revenue, and then enabled us to go out there and activate FIFA World Cup, activate athletes, activate other NHL clubs, etc. And you will know the leaves and the activations that we've done around the GTA, because the conversation just became, hey, we're Powerade and we're proud of it. It took a complete mind shift on the organization to say, yeah, you know what, we believe in this product, and that's the end of it. We're probably still at 38 to 40 share these days.
But it took a product innovation investment and that R&D to get to that point. It wasn't the same product wasn't going to do it. The consumer needed to believe and to be shown that this product is superior. It will make me recover that much faster.
And that's exactly it. That's exactly it. The consumer were already programmed that Gatorade was a better product. When you line price them, why would anybody pick up the Powerade? So it wasn't only just innovation on the product side, it was some clever thinking on pricing and bottle sizes, etc. And everything just came across as just a perfect storm for us.
So distribution is obviously a huge part of that, but guys like you have to also put campaigns in place and have to invest a sizable amount in marketing in order to get to that point. So when you looked at your multi-channel marketing strategy on this property, what were some of the keys to making that work? Was it TV at that time, TV commercial first, sport properties second, or athlete endorsements? How did you guys prioritize within the Powerade brand? Because I know ISO is a different category. We always talk about product to lips, and when they can see that on an athlete drinking on TV, etc.
Yeah, I think it was a 360 approach that really helped us deliver. So when you're thinking about the marketing funnel, you got massive reach vehicles, and then you got one-to-one vehicles. So Coca-Cola is known for the one-to-one vehicles. So you've seen some of the sampling programs that we done, because we know then when somebody tastes Coca-Cola, they will buy it 2.5 times throughout the year. We know that. The story with Powerade was a little bit different. It's not a satisfying beverage. It's a functional beverage. So you got to, number one, demonstrate your credentials. So it was Ion 4 formulation, and then it was the official sports drink of the FIFA World Cup 2010. Those two things together make sure that you're reaching a mass audience. And then when you have those discussions with the buyer at Loblaw or the buyer at Metro, and they're seeing there's a lot of noise happening in the marketplace, and it's Powerade making the noise, not Gatorade, then you can have a conversation with on how do we expand distribution, how do we grow our presence on shelf, etc. So I guess I came in at the right time, if you summarize it.
But it's it's the power of those global rights that helps take this forward. And without those rights, it would have been difficult to tell that story, right? That truth, right?
Exactly, because you have to deliver the credibility on the product itself. But when you're signed off by Canada Soccer, or you're signed off by the FIFA World Cup, or you're signed off with the Leafs or TFC, that it just provides an additional layer of depth, and you can have those conversations. It's just, how do you make the equity of that sporting property rub against the equity of your brand? And when you find it and it works, it's great.
It was always great working with brand marketers like yourself when we're negotiating these types of deals, because what you just said right there is the magic of how it's all going to come together. And as much as it's going to help you sell more products, for us, it's going to help us build our brand, whether it's the Leafs Raptors or even an emerging brand like Toronto FC, it's that much more important if we've got a brand like Coca-Cola believing in it and telling these types of stories. So, you had the benefit of being a brand marketer at one of the biggest two of the biggest companies in the world from a CPG standpoint, and having these bucket of rights, whether it's Olympics or World Cup, and you're able to debit into those and pull. So Coca-Cola, being the global brand that it is, certainly negotiates a number of these major rights, whether it's World Cup or Olympics. In a brand marketer in Canada, you've got the ability to pull into those rights. So World Cup, let's talk specifically about first, and the power of soccer. We've heard it over and over again. We had a gentleman from Budweiser on earlier, and we talked about the power of soccer globally. But I'd like to talk about the intersection of a number of different passion points that Coca-Cola leveraged into. World Cup rights, music, and brands together, right? Make something magic. Coca-Cola and music is something that's very special. And for me, thinking back to the 2010 World Cup in South Africa, Kanon and the waving flag song, everybody remembers that song and the connection to Coca-Cola. Let's talk about music and World Cup and Coca-Cola, because I know that's an important part of the platform.
Yeah, the Kanon activation was incredible. Not only was the first World Cup in the continent of Africa, he was a Somali Canadian artist, and to be honest, the song was great. So when you have Coca-Cola, soccer, and a great piece of music, you know that you have the recipes for success. For us, when we think about Coca-Cola and passion points, they're very well defined. You have sports as a passion point. You have food as a passion point. You have fashion as a passion point, and then you have music. And there are very different ways of connecting with fans by leveraging those passion points. Is when it becomes that you are able to leverage everything at once, is you really hit it out of the park. And I think that's what happened with South Africa, because we had the music component, the experiential component had a food aspect to it. We have the sport of soccer, and for your audience, even though everybody thinks Canada is a hockey country, there are more registered soccer players in Canada than hockey players. That should be something that we should be very proud of. So it's a recipe for magic. Sometimes it works. With Canada, it was just beautiful. It worked.
I remember 2010 World Cup. We launched Real Sports Bar and Grill, and we watched a number of matches at that venue, and seeing it all come together, which was, at the time, the biggest and the best sports bar in North America. Brands like Coca-Cola activating inside, some of our beer partners activating inside. It was great, and you remember those times, and thinking back to those World Cups, and as I was preparing for this, it brings back those types of memories, and those when a brand and a passion point can connect together, and that comes into your mind, not just the sporting event, then the marketers have done it well.
That's exactly it. And let me put it in perspective. Coca-Cola is CO2, a little bit of sugar, syrup, water. The magic happens is when you connect with the passion point. It goes beyond the product. It goes beyond the brand. We had a saying back at Coca-Cola, which is, every time you walk into that office, you polish the brand a little bit, because with a brand, you have everything. With a product, not so much. It's just when those things collide is when you have marketing magic.
So continuing on with the World Cup theme, and 2014, 2015, two major World Cups. You had a men's World Cup in 14, which was in Rio, and then the women's World Cup hosted in Canada in 2015. Coca-Cola owned the trophy tour for both of those events, major programs, big investment. And I know you were working closely on those programs as well. So that was the ability to bring the physical activation and the touch and feel of an event that maybe, you know, consumers couldn't get to, but you gave them a piece of that. How did that program work for you guys?
Yeah, and just to be clear, the first women's trophy tour was done by the Canadian office at Coca-Cola. The first time that ever happened. And the whole thinking behind it is you're mixing the passion of the fans with something that it's probably not feasible for anyone in their lives to be so close to the actual cup. So the idea is, how do you complement what the brand is selling? How do you complement what the brand stands for? And at the same time, how do you complement the passion point of bringing a little bit of the World Cup to this country? And I mean, I'm super proud about on working on that experiential activation. We had, I don't even know how many millions of bottles of Coca-Cola handed out to. I still see the pictures of the people that are posting that specific. We designed 3 specific Coca-Cola bottles for that activation for the women's, and we can still see people posting their pictures of when they went to the event. I would say it is not the cheapest event to put in place, but it goes beyond. It goes beyond just the marketing activation. It goes beyond the ROI of the event itself. It just creates a much larger relationship between Canadians and the brand. And that's something that you cannot put a specific value in here, is what is the relationship between the consumer and the brand long term. Because we actually have this to a T. We know that if we're able to recruit one team at Coca-Cola, it's worth $2,800 in the lifespan. So we do have it to a T, but it just goes beyond just the brand. It's the connection between the passion point and the Canadian consumer.
If I was at my office at the BMO training ground right now, I'd reach over on my desk and I would show you the bottle from that the women's trophy tour and the programs. You guys also sent out a nice commemorative thing, keepsakes for your partners as well. So it was well done all around. Olympics and in Canada, you know, the connection point of our athletes is real. And you can get closer to the athletes, and Coca-Cola has done a good job of leveraging those global rights as well. During your time at Coca-Cola, you came in on the tail end of the Vancouver Olympics, 2012 in London, 14 in Sochi, 2016 at Rio. The interesting thing about this is, at the same time you've got World Cup, Olympics are happening, you're balancing all of this together. It becomes a lot, and priorities, you have to manage through priorities. So how do you look at these buckets of assets that you own and decide what's going to be the right program to activate at what point, and World Cup versus Olympics versus all that time? It becomes a juggling act of how you manage assets.
Totally. It is a juggling act. The key thing here is, depending on which brand is the priority for the cycle, you would activate one brand versus the other. But the key thing is, when you're thinking about an asset, normally you're thinking about 12 to 16 weeks of marketing flights. So if you're thinking World Cup, you got to start, if it's in June, you're probably starting in April on activating that, because you got to get everything into the retail, you got to get everybody on board, and then you do your max activation during the event itself. Those are for events that are happening like in a 4-year cycle. It's very different when we're thinking about assets. For example, in MLSE, that you have a regular season, that you know when it starts, when it ends, and when is the hiatus of the activation. You got to be very smart in the where you allocate the budget, and it's always data that makes the decisions sway one way or the other. We know the Olympics have great coverage in Canada, and that it normally happens between 5 p.m. and 9 p.m. depending on which country the Olympics are on. But we also know that on the FIFA World Cup, we have a lot of great coverage at 9 a.m., 1 p.m., and 3 p.m. So it's how do you balance the approach to on the for example, the TV buys, the marketing buys, to make sure that you're hitting as much as you can on the consumer side.
Yeah, it certainly is a juggling act, and this next question would fall along the same lines. Your channel partners, you talked about grocery earlier, and you know, mass retail, and you've also got your other trade partners like restaurants, McDonald's, for example, or other major key retail partners. How do you balance out figuring the right programs to run at a McDonald's versus another one of your restaurant partners versus a sit-down restaurant? Because they all want a piece of the action, and they all want to get involved in, and they know it can help them move volume when you cross-pollinate an Olympics program with buying a soft drink at retail. And you know, you think back to some of the Olympics programs over the years, McDonald's pin programs, different things like that. They all come to life in a big way, and you're leveraging marketing dollars from the partner as well. Those are big beasts to pull together.
Yeah, and I think it all goes down to a couple of variables. Number one, what is the interest from those retailers in really building both brands together? Number two, what are the most important things for that specific retailer? McDonald's, as a partner of the Olympics, they also had a vested interest in working with us. But at the same time, when you think about grocery channel, convenience and gas, and dining in, they all have different areas, and they all are asking you for, give me something that the other competitor won't have. And that is the key, is how do you make everybody happy and not make anybody angry? Is how do you activate the right way? And then making sure that you have your priorities in line. Like, if I can get a program into Loblaw, for example, I know it's worth 7 times more than the same program executed at Metro. And so depending on how you balance out your priorities, we know that there's 1,400, I don't know how many McDonald's locations. So if we can get buy-in from McDonald's to execute a co-partner program in their stores, we're gonna hit the majority of the market. And all of those things go into this analysis on, okay, how much time do we spend here? How much time do we spend here? How much effort do we spend here? And how much money do we spend? So it's a balancing act, but priorities are very clear normally.
So I'll go into my last question for your time at Coca-Cola. And this one is more along the lines of the work we had done together. So you and I were across the negotiating table a number of different times. It was usually pretty good. I think it was pretty fair. But you were across the table from so many different properties. And you know, this is just Coca-Cola in Canada. And then you've got Coca-Cola in the US, and broken down into regions. Every property, it wants Coca-Cola or Pepsi. There's only a couple brands that you need to pour soft drinks in your venue, and every property thinks their brand is worth X amount of dollars. So Coca-Cola has to negotiate and figure out, you know, what deals that they want to invest in rights versus volume. And there's a science involved into how you negotiate through all of those different deals and prioritize. Would love to hear a little bit about that negotiating strategy, and is it a city strategy? Is it a property strategy? And how that plays out within the four walls.
Yeah, I would say it's science, but it's also a little bit of art as well. So when you're thinking about how we used to do everything at Coca-Cola, it was always a little bit of art and a little bit of science. And at the end of the day, you got to figure out, based on the data, is what is the scope and the reach of the property? What is the upside of using the property as a marketing vehicle? What is the volume upside of the property? That's also important. For a small brand, like, let's say, I don't know, Simply, that doesn't have a lot of distribution, maybe partnering with the Leafs is a great opportunity, because now we're going to expose the brand to all these people that come to the venue. Maybe for Coca-Cola, not so much because we're readily available everywhere. So all of these things go into this massive equation on, okay, this is the marketing upside that we see. This is the value that we're putting. And then we got to talk to a lot of brand managers to ask them, hey, do you want to participate? Because normally their brands have a set budget, and that budget gets allocated. Is it for reach? Is it for awareness? Or is it for growing equity? And each brand will have their own different business objectives on a yearly basis. And I can promise you, after going through so many of these scale programming opportunities with Olympics, with World Cup, with clubs, with the MLSE organization, it is never easy. The one thing I would say is, once that deal is signed, every small brand will want to activate. So that's normally how it goes.
Yeah, I always remember, when as a property owner, and a rights owner, you're negotiating with the big companies, and Diego, let's go talk to this other brand. I think there's some more money there. They're going to want a piece of this, and I'll do this. We'll do the same with Labatt, and because there's these different piles of money that we want to be able to activate in on. So it's always an interesting strategy. So we'll transition back to your time at Major League Soccer over the last 3 years. So you being the very first employee of MLS in Canada, and before that time, it was people like myself working with the league office down in New York and trying to get them to understand the Canadian market and help grow soccer here in Canada. But it was 3 years ago when they decided to put you in place to help build that brand forward and to take it to the next level. So at the time when you joined, you being the marketer that you were, and the background that you had at both P&G and Coca-Cola, and then transitioning into this new role where it's combination building brand, driving revenue. How have you been able to balance that, and what has been some of the maybe some of the surprises or some of the wins that you've had along the way as you're trying to manage those numbers of priorities?
Yeah, I think if we take a step back, what is the vision for Major League Soccer Canada? Is to become the #1 voice of the sport in this country. And there are 3 pillars to achieve that. You touch on them. #1, building equity for the league. #2, growing the fandom, because as you grow the fandom, you expand your reach. And #3 is driving a commercial avenue. You can't do #1 and #2 without #3. I would say the one thing that surprised me the most as we started doing some understanding of the fan base in Canada is, and this might be a surprise to you as well, 87% of fans in Canada follow a Canadian club and a US club. And 35% of the fan base in Canada actually don't follow any of the Canadian clubs. So that gave us a window of opportunity on trying to understand, how do we work with TFC, with Vancouver, with Montreal, and make this an additive proposition. And up until now, I mean, we brought some real good partners on board. Kellogg's, one of them. Coca-Cola, we brought on board. We also brought on board Coca-Cola for the clubs. We continue to do great work with Adidas. We continue to do great work with Continental. Now, the key thing is, how do we leverage the marketing power of those brands and their scope to elevate the Major League Soccer brand in Canada? And I think as we go, we learn. And some things work, some things don't. And I think whenever you have the support of brand leaders who understand, hey, there's something here behind the passion of the sport, and we can have a Canadian representative also help us to deliver against Canadian insights with Canadian business opportunity. I think it's a good recipe.
The approach that you've taken is unique versus how some of the other leagues might operate, because we're in this growth phase. And we all know we're growing this game together. We've got this shining light ahead of us that is World Cup 2026. We hope there's going to be 5+ games in Toronto specifically, but we know there's going to be at least 10 matches in Canada. which is massive. The biggest global sporting event hosted in our country, and then most of them hosted in the US. So it's a huge opportunity for growth of the game, both within our country and in the US. But the collaborative approach that we've collectively taken here to grow the game in Canada and to grow the overall pie is unique. And that's been your position since day one, versus saying, the league's going to come in, we're going to go and we're going to drive our own partners that is about, commercial opportunity. And so we're always thinking of growing together. And that's a unique proposition. So it's always been something we've appreciated, but I'd love to hear insight as to why that approach.
Yeah, I mean, spot on. I think if you talk to my boss when he first hired me, he said, if you are able to help the clubs, I don't care what happens with the league aspect of it, make sure that you have all the insights and you're supporting the clubs as best as possible. And that has been the approach since day one. And I always fall back to this example, which is, I come from Venezuela, right? So I first came to Canada in 2008. And there were two things that any immigrant knows when it comes to Canada. Number one, Coca-Cola. Number two, soccer. So the thinking here is, as we elevate the game together, there's going to be more opportunities for everybody, because we're not competing between Major League Soccer and USL, or Major League Soccer and CPL or Canada Soccer. That's not the competition. The competition is other leagues that are taking the attention span of consumers. So another global sport like the NBA, that is the biggest competitor that we have. When you're thinking about CFL and their reach in the marketplace, those are the things that we need to think about. More soccer, the better. So as we're thinking through how do we help the clubs, as we're thinking how do we develop the equity of the league, it only works in our benefit to help the Canadian clubs. And I don't think that is the situation with other leagues based on my interactions with other league partners.
And in line with the theme of growing the game, the league has done a tremendous job over the last, I'll say 15 years. The commissioner talks a lot about 2007 as an important year when Toronto FC launched into the league, and then subsequently Seattle and beyond that, the expansion clubs onward really drove the growth of the league. We're starting to see a lot of interleague competition with Major League Soccer and Liga MX, whether that's new events like the Leagues Cup, whether that's the Campeones Cup, which is champion versus champion, and MLS All-Star, for example. There's lots of rumors and recent publications just about, will there be a North American Super League? And if there was a North American Super League between Major League Soccer and Liga MX, would that be perhaps one of the top 2 to 3 leagues in the world from a competition standpoint? When you start to talk about it that way, it's pretty exciting, and the events that we've put on so far are starting to gain momentum and traction, and the clubs are starting to take them more seriously. And I didn't mention CONCACAF Champions League, which is the big event that oftentimes is competed with Liga MX clubs and the Major League Soccer clubs. So I'm curious to hear your perspective on that, and well, while we can't share much and talk too much about what that future holds, it's exciting to think about.
Yeah, so I can't comment on the Super League question, but if you go back to what we're trying to do as a league, and it's to become one of the top leagues in the world, the first step is making sure that your clubs are top level, and our measuring stick in this region is Liga MX. So, I mean, TFC had an incredible run. Atlanta had an incredible run. And then we're starting to see what happens when the Mexican clubs get a chance to experience what Major League Soccer is all about. And the transfers between clubs, the transfers in, the transfers out. So all of those things working towards the vision of becoming one of the top soccer leagues in the world. So I can't comment on any Super League plans, but it's not crazy to think that one day that could happen.
As we transition into the last section here, Diego, we're going to reflect a little bit just about career, and this is going to be delivered to a number of third and fourth year students, in mostly in marketing, but in a very different backgrounds, as this is an elective course. So we'd just love to hear a little bit about maybe some of those guiding principles that helped you along in your career, and if you had to pick one or two things that you would say were your keys to success as you're climbing through your career journey, as you reflect back on that, what could you pass on?
Thank you for that question. The engineering me is going to come out. If there's one thing that I would say it is critical, is data. Understanding data, following the data, because your arguments become that much more credible. You can turn people's minds when you have the data to back it up. Not being afraid of diving into understanding, I don't know, Nielsen share reports, understanding what is the ratings looking like for your broadcast partner, understanding what drives those business results, and always using data as your starting point. Because a lot of people have a lot of opinions, but when the data and when your thinking is backed by data, it just makes it much more of a stronger argument. I've been following data completely objectively for 20 years, and I'm thinking I'll probably do the same for the next 20 years. So this is just one man's perspective. Hopefully that provides value. But yeah, if you ask me the one thing, follow the data.
That's not surprising, because I remember back when I was commuting, as I had for 19 years in my career before the pandemic. You and I would chat. I'd be on my way home, and we'd be talking, and you'd be like, Shufi, have you seen the CFL ratings? Have you seen the MLS ratings? We would always talk, and you would have that data point always, and you'd be informing me along the way, because we get different data at different points of time. So the next question is, as you are a hiring manager, as you've been for a long part of your career, what are some of those things that you look for in new talent? And is that the same, or has it changed after the pandemic? Has your mind shifted as to what you're looking for when you hire, let's say, somebody right out of school into their first role, maybe into an entry-level position within an organization?
Yeah, I don't think it necessarily has changed due to the last year that we've lived through the pandemic. I would say key traits that I would always look for are, is somebody honest? Is somebody self-aware? Does that person inspire trust? Is that person okay being embarrassed? Is one of the big ones for me, because if you're comfortable being wrong, that will get you far in your professional career. And I would say it all depends on what the leader is looking for. Since like 2010, it's always been the case where I want to hire for my areas of opportunity. So I want to get the best ones on potentially process management, potentially on data analysis, and then circle yourself with the people that are going to make you a better leader. And it all depends. Every situation is going to be different, but there's one thing that never changes, and is a person is somebody that inspires trust, is somebody that is self-aware, and it feels okay being embarrassed in any particular situation. That's somebody that will be always ready to learn and will be always ready to to help the team out. That would be my 2 cents on that.
That's great. And then the last question here, it's a tap in, but I'm curious myself. Talk to me about your favorite sporting event that you've ever attended in person. We all miss the in-person events right now, so hearing stories like this just make us feel good. So what do you got?
Oh, that's an easy one. Uruguay, Ghana, South Africa. Handball from Suarez. They missed the penalty. Oh, for those who don't know, I was born in Venezuela, but all my family is from Uruguay. So I wear the Uruguay jersey every day. So hands down, most incredible moment of my life. I think I cried. Yeah, I definitely cried.
Unbelievable. That's great. I miss those moments for sure. And then the very last one. So you've had 15 years, great career so far, big brands, mostly in marketing, a bunch of sales experience now as well. Built some great relationships along the way. So, in another 20 years, Diego retires. What do you want to be remembered for after your career journey is over?
That's a tough question. Honestly, I would say the most important thing for me is my family. So if I do good for them, I consider myself having a good run. Don't really care too much about external legacy. As long as the family is good, everybody's healthy, and everybody's happy, it's a good day in my house.
There you go. That answer doesn't surprise me, based on I know how much you take care of the family and extended family. So very good. Diego, I want to thank you on behalf of Ryerson University, on behalf of myself, Dr. Cheri Bradish, who is the lead on this course. It's been a great discussion today. Your background with these major brands, the insights you've been able to provide, a lesson in marketing for sure. It's been a great discussion. So thank you very much, and appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Okay. Cheers.
Take care, Chris.